happy to.
All right. So we're here to talk teacher layoffs because you've got this operation going on with the phone banking.
Yep.
And I just wanted, the first question is, what this 6,000 or so, 6,100 number that's out there, what is your office doing, or what are you doing to ensure, one, that number is brought down as low as possible, and two, that we're not just talking about layoffs, but also positions lost too. The UFT has talked about a changing number of possible attrition and other things. So what are we looking at number-wise?
Right.
What are you doing?
The grand total is around 6,000, of which we've understood at least 4,100 is layoffs.
Okay.
The total is, I think, devastating. I think it would set back the schools long term for sure. We are trying to say that with the case of the layoffs, that 4,000 plus, we believe those savings can be found within the Department of Education by cutting consultant contracts, teacher recruitment. Again, the one I find most ironic, $25 million for teacher recruitment in the middle of a huge series of layoffs. Cutting the technology contracts. Any smart person would say, isn't some of that technology absolutely necessary for day-to-day functioning? I'm sure it is. I would not cut that, but I think other elements of it is more optional compared to having enough classroom teachers.
Okay. What do you think of the city's proposal that was out there about the UFT contributing from the health plan to cover those savings?
I think that option needs to be on the table. I mean, at this point, I think the worst thing for all of us would be to see these positions lost. I think, again, it would set back schools in a long-term manner. I use the example of my son's school where he'll be going to high school, will lose 11 teachers, and that's a huge impact. So I think the cuts within the DOE's own budget, alternative cuts that we've talked about, need to be looked at. The health care fund needs to be looked at. I think it's important that there be an equitable solution on the health care fund and some real guarantees if the unions are making concessions that they will not have layoffs. That should be an iron-clad guarantee. But that certainly has to be a part of the discussion.
Okay. In parallel with these pending or threatened layoffs, there's also a lot of criticism of the mayor's administration with regard to co-locations. There's a trial going on right next door right now at the NAACP and the UFT. And so where does your office stand in terms of that ongoing lawsuit, and what work have you been doing around informing parents and working with communities around that?
I respect the underlying concerns that led to the lawsuit, but did not choose to be a part of it because I thought it was addressing a huge number of schools in very different situations. What we've tried to do is get involved in specific co-locations, specific closures that we thought were really unfair, that where the process had not worked, where parents weren't listened to and communities weren't listened to. PS 114, the closure that almost happened in Canarsie, Brooklyn,
right,
which is, to me, one of the worst stories I've heard in a long time, of bureaucracy missing the point, parents and teachers for years pointing out that the principal was running the school into the ground, weren't listened to by DOE. Finally, DOE admits the mistake, changes the principal, and then announces the school has to be closed because it's gotten too bad. I mean, a total catch-22. Thank God in the final hours, literally with the help of a lot of leaders around the area, that school was saved. I was happy to play a role in that. But some of the co-locations we're working on, Brandeis on the Upper West Side, Wadley and Harlem, PS 308, Bed-Stuy, are all, to my mind, fundamentally illogical and counterproductive. I think it's perfectly appropriate to have charter schools have opportunities to be established and grow. It's perfectly appropriate in some cases to have co-locations where there is the space and the right arrangement can be made. But where there isn't enough space, which is the case of PS 308, or it's the wrong space, which is the case of Brandeis, which is a secondary facility, all middle school, high school, no elementary, wrong place to put an elementary school. Some of these co-locations are just poorly configured, poorly conceived, should not go forward. And DOE is never, literally never willing to say that they made a mistake and try a different approach, and that's what we're fighting against.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for some clarity on that. You mentioned PS 114. I've worked with Paul Robeson High School in Farson, and we're facing a phase out there. And there are many schools that are party to this, that are part of this lawsuit, that are facing imminent closure or phase out, and many parents feel that has been part of the city's plan to push these schools out and replace them either with charters or other co-located schools. And so what support have you given to the parents in the communities in those neighborhoods that are facing phase-outs?
We've tried to support across the board the notion of a more democratic process that we actually laid out a template last year that we thought the DOE agreed to for a more appropriate process where you actually engage parents early, laid out the plan in a detailed manner, not a cursory educational impact statement, but a real detailed one with real life statistics about what it would mean for kids, and then give a chance for feedback, including the kind of feedback that might change the plans in a meaningful way. We thought we had agreement last year for the DOE to pursue that going forward. They did not follow through on that commitment. So what we have ended up doing is trying to work case by case to change some of these individual decisions. We're going to keep going back to to try and get structural change, but we know it's not going to happen, in these next weeks. So it really has come down to trying to fight on a few specific fronts that we thought where we were most able to make the point that the change in the school would have a negative impact.
One big charter advocates have been starting to sort of place themselves for the upcoming mayoral race, and Democrats for Education Reform, DFER, has said that they're planning to meet with all potential mayoral candidates. Have you met with DFER?
Yeah, I've met with DFER, and speaking as public advocate, the conversation occurred as public advocate, and it was a good conversation. I've, always said that I believe charter schools have a role to play in our educational lineup, and good charter schools do great service. They are not a panacea. There are good charters and bad charters, just like there's good traditional public schools and bad traditional public schools. A lot of charters need to do a better job, or have needed to do a better job in terms of including the same percentage of special ed kids and English language learners as the traditional public schools in their area. And we need other reforms, more parental involvement in some cases, etc. I think some folks in the charter movement understand that and are open to that. But I don't think there's a conspiracy here. I think the fact is that there's a movement of folks trying to push charter schools. And there's a lot of folks who believe in traditional public schools, and the goal here is to try and help both types of schools do as well as possible. When there might be a possible co-location, to make it work, to not inherently discomfort the school that's already in place that is trying to succeed. And I think that's been the problem in the DOE approach, that inherently going in and disrupting a school that's working or trying to get better, which is not, to me, good policy.
Well, it's good to see your support in this. I appreciate it. We'd love for you to come down to Bloombergville also and visit those that are fighting against the teacher layoffs. You'll find an ally in us to do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right,
appreciate it.
keep it up.
Well, right before you leave, we're going to do a quick stand-up with Sino Vision.
Sure.
Just a